Shoini ma'am, I think we can begin.
Sure. So, good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you joining us from across the country and even globally for this exclusive session on health economics in the age of AI, rethinking value and access in pharma. My name is Shohini Ghosh, and I'm Global Executive MBA Alumna, batch of 22. I'm also the Director, Administration and Chief of Staff, Office of the Vice Chancellor at Ahmedabad University, and I'm going to be your moderator today. So welcome to all of you. As we all know, the pharmaceutical world is changing faster than ever before. AI, predictive analytics, digital twins, regulatory innovations, and personalized medicine are not just buzzwords anymore. They're shaping how we think, operate, and grow. And this transformation is no longer just scientific, it's strategic, digital, and global. And that's exactly what we are here to explore today. In this session, you'll hear thoughts from our speaker about what's driving this disruption. Whether you're working in regulatory affairs, R&D, manufacturing, commercial strategy, or leading your own pharmaceutical venture, this session promises to support and inspire your journey through today's rapidly evolving pharma landscape. Please join me in welcoming Professor Chirantan Chatterjee, who has joined us today to speak on health economics in the age of AI. Welcome, Professor, and thank you for giving us your valuable time today. To give you a short introduction of our illustrious speaker, he is Professor of Developmental Economics, Innovation and Global Health at the University of Sussex, and a visiting professor at Ahmedabad University as well as the Max Planck Institute. Professor Chatterjee is also the founding fellow of the Royal Economic Society, and he is a GEMBA faculty teaching pricing strategies, AI in pharma, and pharmaceutical economics. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Shoini. Can we have the slides?
Yes.
So the plan today is to talk about what was proposed as the topic of the webinar, which is health economics in the age of AI. And I will get started on this shortly, but let me tell you as a prelude that the GEMBA PM program is one of its kind, not just in India, I would also say in Asia in some sense. And I'll tell you why, because I've been teaching in this program for the last few years. There's a lot of buzz in the world around how AI is transforming health and pharma economics broadly, but not much that universities are doing around the world. And I am talking about this from the UK side, in a more focused human capital generation, especially for those in the middle of their careers in terms of continuing education. So when I was proposed to do this webinar, I jumped at the opportunity and I thought, okay, I'll have to share my slides and then open up for Q&A from your side if you have aspirations to join the GEMBA PM program, and Shoini will have some thoughts to add as well, how it adds value to your career aspirations. We can have the next slide, Mehak. So the topic itself is going to lead you into a trilemma. So the trilemma is around these three words that are there in the topic: health, economics, and age of AI. And you will see that consciously I have placed it in such a pecking order where health comes first, economics comes next, and age of AI comes towards the end. There is a temptation in different economic contexts to change this pecking order. AI could be the one that comes up front before health and economics. Economics can come up front before health and AI, etc., etc. But I want to philosophically position this as a trilemma, which is basically that ultimately it's about health of nations. And if it's about health of nations, we have to think about the underlying scarcity, trade-offs, choices we are making. And in the process of doing that, both on the supply side as well as on the demand side, how can AI augment in a responsible, humanistic fashion the considerations that policymakers, managers, corporates, entrepreneurs, financiers of startups, etc., have to take while making sure that all that's happening with tech and health is actually socially welfare enhancing. We can have the next slide, Maya. to me, the big idea that comes out actually out of the pandemic is this value system that we that we basically lend to health. What I have seen over the years, 20 years of working with pharma and health in India, in the US, in the UK, this value system is very heterogeneous. In some countries, health is indeed wealth, which is why you see something like a NHS in the UK. But in other countries, free markets and capitalism have taken over, which means that there is a notion that if you can create economic growth and wealth, it will automatically translate into health. And this we saw in the debates around the lockdown. Some folks were pro-lockdown, some folks were anti-lockdowns, and different countries had different policies around how much to lock down, how aggressively to lock down, etc. And that question, I think, has to be resolved first while we think about the underlying economics and the underlying AI implications of this broader value system, whether health is wealth or is it vice versa. And in that conversation, one of the big things that sticks out is what is called as the Preston curve. So basically, Preston collated data over time and countries to show that as you grow over time, as you economically develop over time, the x-axis is GDP per capita, it does lead to a better life expectancy, which means that it does seem like wealth translates into better life expectancy. But then at the same time, there's a plateauing of the curve that I'm showing you. So there are diminishing returns from being wealthy in some sense. And you can see this in the context of obesity conversations today in pharmaceutical world, where people are pondering that with these anti-obesity pills, maybe I don't care whether I should be thinking about preventive health, etc., and all those debates that come along with it. So the point that I want to take away from this slide is, my hope is, whether you are a corporate professional, an entrepreneur, a policymaker, we change the orientation, especially in a context like India and in other global South economies I work with, whether it's in South Africa, Brazil, China, that the value system should be about health being wealth, whether that is being attended to, and subsequently all micro considerations around industry formation, public policy to solve market for failure, how to think about financing healthcare, the universal healthcare systems, how to think about tech in health, AI in health, etc. So that's the basic message of this particular slide, that health should be normatively thought to be as wealth, which is why it came at the top of my pecking order in the trilemma slide previously. And then subsequently, we can think about the economics around it, how AI can help or deter this particular conversation. We can go to the next slide, Mayank. So if health is wealth, then the big question is, can we just keep creating a lot of startups and interventions and providers and solutions and new business models in health that will result in a demand uptake, right? And we see this a lot. India especially is a very vibrant land of entrepreneurial activity around healthcare for at least till the last 4 decades, from when the Apollo hospitals came in, and then there were next generation of unispecialty hospitals, a bunch of startups from ecosystems like Bangalore and Hyderabad. And the hope was that all of this will translate into uptake and adoption, which will improve the health of micro societies, communities, households, and states, and also as a result, broadly, the nation's health quotient. But have we really seen that happen? Have we really seen that all these interventions have paid off for everybody with equal access to healthcare, such that the health of nation has improved? Probably not, if you look at the statistics. And in that context, you are reminded of what is called the Say's law. It's an old economic law from the French economist Jean-Baptiste Say, and he talks about the idea that what Jean-Baptiste theoretically proposed, which is that supply creates its own demand. The picture here is of Tom, who is creating lots of lemonades, hoping that somebody will come and consume these lemonades, as long as these lemonades are in the store and he has a shop set up. But empirically, if you look at whether that translates into the demand or not, is not so validated. Tom suffers. Tom sometimes doesn't do the relevant things that helps in demand side uptake. And that's the big debate in the context of healthcare. You can do a lot of AI and startup-driven intervention or business model-driven interventions in healthcare. But so long as you're not doing it at the right price points, for the right geographies, for the right patient populations, you might run into market failures and Say's law is invalidated. Okay. Can we have, and this we can see in couple of startups which were like unicorn startups when they started off. Can we have the two other pictures in this slide? These two startups are, one is a very recent one, 23andMe, about personal genomics data. You could swab your saliva and you could get what could be potentially your disease conditions that can be predicted from your genetic profile. But 23andMe has not, after 15 years of trying to be successful, raising Silicon Valley money, etc., has not really gone anywhere. In fact, these days it's going through a situation of bankruptcy. People are debating what would happen to the data that has been given to 23andMe, etc. Theranos is another example of how you had a startup giving you a panacea in the context of healthcare, tech and health. You just gave a blood test and that would give you all the results, was the idea that Elizabeth Holmes and her team had. But even there, what was found was there was a lot of overstated claims. And in fact, she's now also criminally suffering because of all the overstated claims and the supply side push she wanted to inflict with her startup in some sense. So the broader moral message is that Say's law might be awesome to hear theoretically, but there could be an oversupply situation if we do and dance around the idea of health and AI and economics, and we don't pay attention to the relevant regulations that are required, the relevant responsibility questions that are there in the context of AI, and the relevant equitable way through which you can distribute healthcare for especially populations in the global south like in India, which is all a demand side consideration. And that's something we want to keep an eye on while thinking about health, economics, and in the age of AI. We can go to the next slide. So where does economics come in these conversations? Well, economics basically is a story of a lot of scarcity and how do you make choices and decisions and trade-offs because of all the scarcity, as you all know. And I keep telling this in my GEMBA PM classes that this is the starting point of economics. Firms suffer from scarcity, which is why they have to optimize their cost functions and think about profit maximization in a simultaneous fashion. Consumers and patients are constantly thinking about their budgets and then thinking about what utility they're getting out of consuming healthcare or other products and services. And it is this debate around scarcity optimization that makes economics very relevant in the context of health and AI conversations. Can we have the next slide, the next picture? So the next picture is about the fact that somebody is asking that if I create a monopoly, I can set whatever price, but that also means that people have no choice but to pay for it or get excluded from it. And this is a big conversation in the context of health because the public and private debates around how health should be distributed around the world in India or anywhere else continues. And you can see that with the Biden administration and then now with the Trump administration deciding on all kinds of things around Obamacare. You can see that in UK where NHS is being transformed and streamlined. Big public debt issue results in the public distribution of healthcare being totally under the focus of all governments, which means that if you create a startup or a business model that allows you to generate a monopoly and only focus on certain sections of the population who can access the prices and services of your products and services as a monopoly, you will run into hot water from a regulatory perspective. So while from a corporate side, your idea is to fulfill unmet need and provide competitive advantage and differentiation, from a societal perspective, the debate is whether that is actually allowable because it might create complications for the choices society is making and entrepreneurs are making in access versus innovation. And this is something that is definitely very relevant in the context of AI. So when you see a DeepMind or a Mistral in France or someone else talking about, I will find a new way to catch cancer early, or I'll find a new way to predict heart attacks, or etc., etc. You get the drift. The point is that these are not cheap. These are not going to be cost-free. The private firms and the private entrepreneurs who are going to do this are going to file a patent. The patents will give some sort of a artificial monopoly, which might mean pricing considerations. So you'll have to then debate with the governments whether these interventions should be included as part of the insurance systems. And all these related things means that economics is at the heart of value-based healthcare and health technology assessment conversations that countries around the world are doing around, including in India, where we have several very robust conversations about how to create a sustainable, robust, healthy economy that can take care of the zoonotic exposures we have in this era of the Anthropocene, where you can expect another pandemic to come very soon in some sense. Can we have the next screenshot? And this goes back to the moral issues, the values issues around how to think about healthcare. This is a conversation, by the way, which has implication for other public goods like education. Should education be a publicly provided product or service, or should it be all privately driven? That's another simple story here that is very similar to what's happening in healthcare. And Dr. Martin Luther King was talking about how he saw that of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhuman. So in the era of AI, the big question is, can AI help in solving these distortions and create things more equal, or in an unintended way, create consequences for health inequality? That's what we want to keep an eye on, whether you are a professional trying to solve a particular problem from the supply side, whether you're a policymaker, whether you're an entrepreneur who is creating a new startup for a particular predictive algorithm that catches tuberculosis, cardiac care, or cancer care early, etc., etc. And the broader macro conversations, like we can have the next picture here, the broader macro conversations, I think, is that India can really show the way, not only because it has been a land of entrepreneurs and I would say frugal innovation, but also because the way healthcare has been done, even if it has been very fragmented and sometimes there are failures, the healthcare ecosystem in India is very cost sensitive. As a result, if you can look at all these solutions that India has provided vis-a-vis other solutions that are available in the richer nations of the world, whether it's in heart bypass surgery, knee replacement, hip replacement, heart valve replacement, etc. India's story has always been that can we make it democratic, cost effective, while keeping quality on mind, which is where we see the rise of all these hospital systems like Arvind Eye Hospital, LV Prasad Eye Institute, which I work with. And it's not just to solve India's problems with the underlying economics here, but also by setting a health leadership orientation to these conversations for all of Global South. What can be solved in terms of unmet needs in a frugal fashion in India using technology and AI potentially can be a solution for the entire of Global South. And this is very much correlated with the broader geopolitical conversation that is happening. I was reading the other day around this new axis that's emerging around Russia, India, and China. People are looking at India, not just from a demand vibrant ecosystem perspective, but also from a supply perspective where it has prior experience, capabilities, and pedigree to deliver it for itself and various parts of the developing world, and can it do that leadership story along with the underlying economics in this conversation? You can go to the next slide, Meher. Now here, I want to show you three things, but there's a video here that I want to first show, which is by Jeff Hinton, who got, interestingly, he's called the father of artificial intelligence, and he is basically a guy who is a little anti-AI person. He's very worried that AI can actually take over our ways of thinking, our cognitive capacities, and this should not be the way AI should be doled out in society. So Jeff basically talks about how radiology, in particular, as a clinical subfield, is going to change. And we're going to listen to this video, but notice that at the end of the video, I'll have something interesting to say about what Jeff says. And we can first see the video and then we can come back to a conversation around what Jeff is saying. Incidentally, Jeff is a former postdoc from Sussex, so there's a lot of initiatives here around AI across the university. So that really rang a bell when I thought I'll talk about health economics in the age of AI. Meha, we can start the video.
Yeah, just let me know we can hear the sound.
Yep.
Okay.
So, Jeff, perhaps a similar question, if you may. What do you think is some of the most exciting work to come?
Okay, so, sorry. Let me start by just saying a few things that seem obvious. I think if you work as a radiologist, you're like the coyote that's already over the edge of the cliff, but hasn't yet looked down, so doesn't realize there's no ground underneath him. People should stop training radiologists now. It's just completely obvious that within 5 years, deep learning is going to do better than radiologists because it's going to be able to get a lot more experience. It might be 10 years, but we've got plenty of radiologists already. I said this at a hospital, and it didn't go down too well, but there you go. There's going to be thousands of applications of the deep learning technology we currently have, especially stuff using fast chips, to thousands of applications, and hundreds of them are going to work, and those are the ones you're going to hear about. So there'll be lots of that. And I think of that now as business as usual. Take any old problem where you have to predict something and you have a lot of data, and deep learning is probably going to make it work better than the existing techniques.
We can go back to the slides, Mayank. So if you had seen that video, it's there on YouTube. You will see that this video is 8 years old. Okay, and Jeff was sounding that the era of having human radiologists is over. The coyote has fallen over the cliff, refusing to see that the ground underneath has gone, and this particular subfield in the clinical world should be just done away with. But 8 years down the line, radiologists are still there in India, whether it's in India or in the UK or in the US. Okay, the change that has happened though is the tasks that these radiologists do, along with technology and deep learning and other algorithms that have come in to make radiology far more meaningful. And that's the point that AI will do to health and economics around healthcare globally, which is that as you bring in more technology in healthcare, you will have to skill people to work with technology and also see whether that's actually generating better health outcomes and is of value to a particular nation's choice around the public budget conversations that is there around healthcare. So that's the idea that I wanted to say, that if you talk to people on the ground. I have a former IIM Ahmedabad student who is a doctor. She was asking me the other day that, sir, what do you think about AI in healthcare? And my point is, and would doctors be any relevant these days? And I was like, well, in some subfields, there might be considerations of a human-computer displacement that is going to happen, or complementarity that has to be more taken care of. But in other subfields, or in other broader pharmaceutical kind of ecosystems, the old role of human beings and the discovery and the serendipity points that they bring to the innovation production function will potentially remain. And a lot of these is optimism, sometimes fake optimism, which results in investorial money to flow in those directions of AI and healthcare, that we have to be cautious about. That's my basic point about Jeff's video, which is that radiology still remains, but human-computer interaction conversations have certainly very much become very central in the conversation of that subfield. And that's the direction of travel in terms of how tasks are going to be reorganized and change health broadly in the era of AI. And it is in that context I also want to highlight and strongly encourage everyone to read the book by Arvind and Sayash. Arvind is a computer scientist at Princeton, and he has written a lovely book, very accessible book. It's not a technical jargon-filled book. It's about the hype machine that's going on around AI and healthcare. Very pertinent, especially because you have, even within countries like India, in some sense, a lobby that seems to think that if you bring AI and technology in the conversation around AI and posit that you have an amazing solution for an unmet need, you will get the right valuation for your unicorn startup and spend the money. But basically, Arvind's book shows how a lot of the investorial money that is flowing around the world is essentially a hype story, and you have to be careful about the snake oils here. Now, who will basically decide whether the oil is a snake oil or a true oil. Well, that's where we need transparency. We need regulatory interventions from governments to showcase how, let's say, bias is taken care of, how privacy systems are robust to make sure that there are no leakages, and how standards in the context of AI in med devices and healthcare are harmonized, not just within, but across countries, that could make sure that we have more true AI that solves diseases of tomorrow, which Google DeepMind CEO Demis Hassabis, who was also a Nobel laureate last year, is talking about how AI can be an end of this. Yes, AI can be the end of the disease decade potentially, but so long as it's not as much of snake oil, so long as it pays attention to these human-computer interaction conversations, so long as it takes care of equitable distribution of healthcare for everybody. Otherwise, we might run into unintended consequences problem, which might result complications for the corporates as well as for entrepreneurs. We can go to the next slide. Yeah. Meha, can you go to the next slide?
Sorry, just
Yeah, so broadly, we started off saying that it's an issue of a trilemma, health versus the economic considerations around access and innovation, and the trade-offs around creating monopolies while making sure, or oligopolies while making sure that health is accessible to all. And the AI issues, where I'm basically cautioning that, of course, AI has amazing potential, but we have to do it in a responsible, safe fashion, and keeping attention to regulation and standards, as well as making sure that the tasks and the skills attend to the human-computer interaction conversation. So this is basically a table around things that are basically floating around. I mean, social media, LinkedIn, lots of stuff from everybody coming through. So I thought I'll pick up a list of 11 and say that we have to move normatively these AI healthcare conversations from a snake oil story to a scalable impact story. And a lovely example of that is a small little startup that's coming out from University of Vermont, Professor Barry Finette. He is basically using like apps, platforms on the phones to complement rural healthcare workers. And he has tested this with peer-reviewed publications and evidence that it's working awesome for primary healthcare, especially in the context of African as well as Bangladesh as well as Latin American economies. And I like the idea a lot because we know the frictions that exist, especially in rural healthcare, and ThinkMD could show the pathway for a scalable impact that is not snake oil, but true oil. The second thing to keep in mind is the story of unintended consequences. So just like any innovation that comes through various generations, whether it was in the past through internet, railroads, electricity, etc., you have to keep an eye on unintended consequences. And that's something that I want to highlight while thinking about AI at the crossroads in the context of global health. The third thing is the story of Japan, where you have this concern that if AI robot nurses come in, they will take away jobs of nurses. But it's also true that various economies are at various stages of their demographic dividend. In fact, if you see at the Western economies, total fertility rates are going down. Immigration is a bogey issue. People don't want labor. So they are basically thinking about bringing in automation and AI to do the job of human beings in the context of the health systems. Of course, in these contexts, there would be a serious conversation that needs to be had around how to take care of the lost jobs, whether there should be a universal basic income for people losing jobs, etc. But in contexts like India, I think the conversation has to be more about managing the skill transition because it's a younger country, and making sure that human beings have the skills to complement automation that has happened already in context like nurse care system in Japan. It does look like vision and machine learning seem to be one place where there has been a lot of progress in the context of AI in healthcare. So AI is big time, very relevant in the context of radiology. Although radiologists have not been replaced, deep learning has ensured that whether it's in detecting cancer or predicting tuberculosis from scans, etc., there has been a lot of progress there. So we have to again think about the complementarity between human beings and AI in maximizing the promise in pixels that has to happen. I have a paper also in the pharmaceutical world where we are going to we are showcasing, and there are many working around this. There's a company called, for example, in silico medicine. The Chinese are doing a lot here, where they are saying that pharmaceutical innovation has traditionally been very costly, uncertain, and time consuming. But if you can bring in AI to speeden up pharmaceutical innovation, identify targets, and basically make discovery more efficient, you can probably get new drugs at a faster clip at lower prices, which will really be of value to society at large anywhere in the world. And I do think that in this, given the large innovation capability, even within generic firms in India, in the pharmaceutical sector, there's a lot of promise with AI in the context of pharmaceutical innovation. The other thing to keep in mind is AI is also about training. So in some sense, India as a lab, I'm sorry to use that word, but it definitely is a lab where you can use different heterogeneous contexts, the diversity that we have, ethnic, language, religion, the way we eat, the way we think about healthcare, etc. It's a lab for training ourselves. Can we have this slide? Yeah. We need to be cognizant of that laboratory such that we get training algorithms that are safe and responsible while respecting privacy and data regulation. 6 and 7 is about business models. We already know what traditional business models like Arvind or Map My Genome or Strand Genomics or even Asha healthcare workers are doing in terms of complementing their work with AI interventions. Regulation is certainly, I would say, lagging a little bit. We need a national conversation around AI and healthcare, not just from a health perspective, but also from, let's say, the energy considerations, the net zero considerations of AI. So we need a national twin transition strategy in some sense, which I mentioned somewhere down in the table. And the last point I would say is that there seems to be a big appetite about leapfrogging in India or in various other global South economies. My point here is, yes, we do need to leapfrog, and AI may enable us to leapfrog, but at the same time, we need to keep in mind that it's about healthcare per se. It's not just about whether we can have AI or whether we can have the economics supporting the AI interventions in healthcare, but it's about broadly national health. And I suggest you guys read up the book by Sujata Rao, Do We Care? Because we keep seeing episodes where health is basically taken as given. We are not very responsible and sensitive about stuff that's happening. So leapfrogging for sure, but we have to do in a sense such that it's responsible and taking care of our care considerations for society at large. So with that, obviously this is a short webinar. I think I'll open up with Shohini to take your Q&A. And I can assure you that some of these things will translate into the program teaching that which I do in the conversation around pharma and health economics in the age of AI. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Professor Chatterjee. I think that was really very insightful, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on the constantly evolving facets of the pharmaceutical industry in the large context of overall economy and healthcare. And I really thought it was, how you structured your talk and bringing health as well to the forefront. I think that was actually, eye-opener of sorts. And thank you also for talking about the GEMBA program. If I may quickly, as an alumnus of the GEMBA program myself, I found the program immensely valuable, and the curriculum is designed to cover the length and breadth of the pharmaceutical value chain, imparting cross-functional knowledge that enables critical thinking, crafting of strategies that are more holistic and transformative, and better decision-making at the end of the day. And I believe that the exceptional faculty comprising of eminent academicians such as yourself and others and industry experts globally was and continues to be another big advantage. In my case, it was through GEMBA that I got associated with Ahmedabad University and was completely blown away by it. And it was also GEMBA that augmented my confidence in allowing me to diversify, which is what brought me to here, and help me to make the decision to change sectors and move from pharma to academia. Now, coming back to the conversation here, Professor Chatterjee, you talked about the snake oil story, hyped AI versus true AI, and how there are several factors. On one hand, there are these biases that you talked about, the need for standardization or harmonization. And then there's also the fact that AI can actually augment drug discovery and interventions. Technological interventions can support innovation in a big way in the pharmaceutical sector. So, which brings me to my first question. How do you see AI and digital health impacting pharma job roles, let's say over the next 5 to 10 years in India and globally?
Good question, Shoini. So I would answer it on three fronts. The first front is that not just in healthcare, broadly, the economy is changing in the way AI is shifting tasks. So some of the rote tasks will disappear. Some new rote tasks will appear, like data annotation and, let's say, AI prompt engineering, etc. These things will also be relevant in the context of healthcare. So we'll have new AI-related rote tasks that is going to be requiring some human capital development and training programs, continuing education, etc. Singapore is a country which is doing a good job in allowing such skill development processes that allow you to take care of the road tasks. The second thing to keep in mind here is, broadly speaking, the stories of trust in the context of AI and healthcare. And there are these stakeholders, whether the corporates, the policymakers, the financiers, the patients, the physicians, all of these around this question of trust. So the question of trust, I think, is a function of science, innovation, and privacy. So to the extent that whatever intervention is happening around AI and healthcare is predicated on science and evidence, to the extent that it really shows an an innovation that is enhancing the unmet need or the friction in the context of health, and to the extent that you are doing it in a responsible, bias-free, private, protecting privacy fashion, you will get the bang for the buck, the return on investment. So in these three spaces, science, innovation, and privacy, I expect more roles, more continuing education requirement, more jobs, more programs like GEMBA PM to play a role. And the last point I would like to say is that regulation still is a very big area. So the current regulatory teams in pharma and health companies will have to come up to speed along with the regulatory body, how to think about digital therapeutics. How do you ponder about clinical trials in the world of digital therapeutics? And how do you harmonize this, be that from India to China to Japan to EMA to US FDA? So I think that's another big space where you can see between regulation, law, tech, healthcare, intellectual property, a new potential for jobs and new skills that will be required in this conversation. If that helps, Shoini.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's very fascinating, and it's actually it encompasses the whole sort of the pharmaceutical ecosystem, if I may, right? So there are so many different aspects, from IP, from regulation, from equity. I mean, it's very there's a lot of things to think about. I'm sure our audience will also have questions, so I'd like to open the floor for a quick round of question and answers. I'd request the audience to raise your hands, and I'll request the GEMBA team to help facilitate audience who may have a question. So,
Hello, I'm
yes.
Jigar here.
Hi, Jigar.
Hi, sir, I do have one question. That recently I have seen that August AI. Okay. And there is a report of my sister-in-law. I have uploaded on that. And that then I get all the detail of the diagnostic treatment. Okay. And I also compare whether the top gastroenterologist doing same or not. But the leading gastrologist of Baroda, I don't would like to take the name, but he has done the treatment like same only. Whether it is Crohn disease or GID or it is a gastritis. So now I am getting very much confidence that what the line of the treatment exactly going on, it is going on the same way or not. That I cross check with this, August AI, and the same way I have second my one of the uncle's cardiology report is there. Its ECG is there. Then I update it. Within 1 minute, I get it is a cardiac arrhythmia along with the electric imbalance of the heart rate.
Yep.
Okay. And the medicine and treatment is same only with the topmost cardiologist.
Yep.
So I get very good confidence on that.
So what's your question?
So my question is that is this the upcoming future in government or all where
I got you. So I think it goes back to the word trust. Okay. And
Yes.
trust is predicated around science, innovation, and privacy. A particular incident in Baroda may not be enough to give you trust across broader populations thinking
Sure,
about
sure.
using LLMs in healthcare. You need scientific evidence that the LLM intervention or August AI or whichever intervention is you are doing is actually at least as credible as the human gastroenterologist. And in this
Mm,
context, there would be some false positives. Sometimes there would be, sometimes there would not be. So you need
mm,
like evidence on this story, number one. Number two, you can't have like a suboptimal innovative intervention. So you have to make sure that there is a design consideration in the LLM that is going to, let's say, displace the gastroenterologist in the question.
mm,
And lastly, you would be unhappy, let's say if you give data to a AI engine and then it starts using that data for other purposes. So in that
mm.
sense, there's still some distance to chart in terms of making it responsible and safe, driven by science, making it design wise very provocative for patients and health systems to adopt. As long as those things are taken care of, they will take time. There will be standards that will be set in terms of allowing it to be a digital therapeutic. You will potentially lead into a world which you just described, which is a world where people will trust these interventions around tech in health. Okay. And we can
Yes.
see this. And in some contexts, it will be a little at a faster clip, like let's say in gastroenterology or radiology. In other contexts, it would be slower to adopt because human judgment will still remain in certain disease
Mm.
conditions. So I think that's the story that we have to keep an eye on from a company perspective or an entrepreneurial perspective, or even as a patient perspective, user of these interventions in the context of digital health.
Even, sir, I have seen that doctors are not accepting that Google search or AI because some of the place I have seen, they are writing that keep your Google and AI knowledge outside the OPD or chamber. That will help us to treat you better.
I will flip your point the other way. I think younger doctors who are coming out, and I've heard
Mm,
this from various anecdotal conversations, knowing that tech in health can give you all these solutions, they are not being motivated to become like dirty their hands on the clinical evidence, the studying,
mm,
etc., etc. So the bigger question is that the profession itself is also changing, not just in clinical context, but also let's say how drugs and devices are rolled out. So this is
yes.
a conversation that is certainly very relevant, which is where my former student, etc., were coming in. And this is where I think GEMBA PM plays an important role. So you need a program which is not coming out from a medical school, a AIMS or a CMC Vellore. You need neither a program which is totally just business school and general management principles and HR and finance. You need something in between which balances these conversations, and GEMBA PM has been able to do this, and Shoini can vouch on this, has been able to balance these issues that you're raising, Jigar,
Yes.
in helping you understand what's happening on not just the diffusion aspect of tech in health, but also the pricing, the regulation, the responsibility, and privacy considerations in the conversations around tech in health. Shoini, you
Yes.
have some thoughts?
So there is a long journey to set up with the doctors and healthcare professionals.
I think so. I think so. I mean, also there's a question of culture here. So so in the UK, for example, doctors are feeling the pinch, not just from generally about health inefficiency conversations, but this country has basically jumped gung-ho on AI in healthcare. And
Mm,
slowly you can see the primacy of the doctor being phased out. But in India, also there were doctor violence conversations. But in general, medicine still is a respected profession. And you have to
yeah.
complement that with, let's say, digitization. How do you manage that transition is a conversation to be had more broadly in the
Mm.
India story. And how India does it has a lesson for, let's say, an Indonesia, a South Africa, a Brazil as well, which is why we are being looked at very carefully how we do it in some sense.
Thank
Sure,
you,
sure.
Professor. And I
Thank
think
you, sir. Thank you.
that was a great question. Thank you. And I agree with what you said. I think there are several nuances that need to be looked at. And like you correctly mentioned, science, innovation, and privacy. I mean, those are really some, very important aspects. And I think GEMBA does help one to take be aware of all these aspects as in order to understand the situation fully, which is what is needed at the moment. I'm going to bring in another question. Mehak, I believe there's another question from the
Yeah.
audience.
I think Kirtika has raised her hand.
Rebecca? Please go
Hello.
ahead.
Yes, thank you for your insightful conversations, sir and ma'am. So my question basically is, I wanted to understand what is the difference between GEMBA and other regular MBA or pharma certification programs. If you can just address that also, please.
I will lean on the GEMBA team, but as I said, I think there are three words in the GEMBA program: global, MBA, and PM. And you need the balance. You don't want a medical school to teach you management and economic principles. You don't also want an MBA school to just telling you MBA and economic principles, but not contextualized in the context of healthcare. And GEMBA PM program, I think, manages to do that very nicely. And in fact, previous cohorts have international students from everywhere, to be honest. So I think it's one of the very unique programs that exist in the South Asia context. Over to you, Sohini, if you want to share more.
Yeah, and I would like to add that first of all, this is probably the only one of its kind MBA program which is geared or customized for pharmaceutical management. So I think that itself is a big differentiating factor. And also it's different from a regular pharma certification in the sense that it brings in managerial aspects which are very important, as well as the scientific, the policy, the IP related to manufacturing, clinical operations in general, like supply and demand techniques. So they're all, it encompasses the whole pharmaceutical value chain from inception, from drug discovery all the way to marketing, right? And and pharmacovigilance. So I think that in that way it is really different from any other MBA program in the country. As well as definitely from any pharma certification that you would find. I can request the GEMBA team or the counselors if you wish to add something.
Sanskruti has a question, Sohini.
Sure. So maybe we'll go over to the next question. Mehak, can we have Sanskruti?
Yes. Sanskriti has posted, how can professionals in non-commercial roles benefit from understanding health economics and strategy?
Absolutely. Can I take that up?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
That's for you.
Okay. So I'll give you specific examples, Sanskruti. So when you are thinking about setting up bioequivalence of a generic drug in the context of, let's say, pharma, what exactly is bioequivalent, and especially in the world of biologics and biosimilars, and the cost considerations for, let's say, a Zydus or a Intas or a Dr. Reddy's or a Biocon, determine the speed with which you have to deliver your tasks in the paperwork that's relevant for bioequivalence. But if you don't have the macro picture of why, let's say, the new laws or the pathways that exist for bioequivalence and setting up quality standards such that your products and services from a certain company are going to be or not going to be approved by regulatory bodies locally or in the US or in Europe, you probably will feel like, why am I doing this? So it's in that sense, health economics and strategy plays an important role. You might think that rituximab should have a biosimilar, but the question is, does rituximab really create equivalent health outcome as, let's say, the patented drug? That's another conversation that you want to have, or understanding that you want to have, before jumping into the nitty-gritties of your daily work around quality and regulation. Also, it helps you get a sense of why regulation happens. So every time certain regulation happens, you read at it, you stare at the news, and you wonder, why are they doing it a certain way? So the underlying economics and strategic motivations between how regulation is incident on you as a corporate professional is very important, because you can then take it back to not just your work, but in strategic input conversations in the board and in your teams that can change the way your particular work is going to shape the way value is generated in your role, if that helps, Sanskruti. Showing you being an alum, you might want to share how this has actually helped you in some sense and add to my points.
No, I mean, I agree. I don't have a specific example in mind, but I do agree that it, if you understand the regulation in terms of what is the evidence and what are the changes that help bring about a regulation and how it affects, all the aspects of the pharmaceutical chain. And where depending on wherever you are in that chain, I think that helps you strategize better and able to understand and, devise outcomes to suit the changes that are happening, because it is a very fast changing world. So I think
Also, yeah. Also, one small little example. Many times companies are not anticipating regulation that is going to be incident on them tomorrow. But if teams and you as a manager in a company are able to read the regulation a priori before the regulation is incident on you. For example, in healthcare, there's a lot of conversations around health technology assessment or value-based pricing. So if you have the skills to how to do HTA or value-based pricing in the context of whatever you are working on, you can actually negate the negative shocks potentially that would be incident on you coming from health regulation. So it is in that sense, we will, and not just me, the other faculty as well, we will hopefully skill you up in anticipating regulation better, such that it gives you competitive advantage vis-a-vis other companies, and also as a health management professional.
Shall we move over to the next question from the audience, Mehak?
Yeah. Forum, you can unmute.
Yes, I just have a quick question. What advice would you give to mid-career professional looking to transition from operational to strategic role?
I'll come to that forum, that question in just a bit. Rohan has a very important question. I think the future of value-based pricing and access in India and globally is certainly here. The macro conversation here is that public debts are very high across all countries, including in India. It's an era of war, pandemics, and climate change. So every intervention around digital health will have to be properly priced, making sure it is value-oriented and such that it takes care of the lowest common denominator in the population. So you can see the PMJY program, Niti Aayog's work, even in certain governments, there is a lot of emphasis around value-based pricing and access in India. The place where there is a gap is people don't understand it properly, which is where GEMBA PM and our teaching comes in, so that you can translate, like I was saying to the previous questionnaire, you can anticipate and inform regulation in a way such that this gap, this understanding and the evidence-based issues around value-based pricing and HTA is more centrally positioned in the decisions we take in the world of diseases and Anthropocene. Now, coming to your point around moving from operational role to strategic roles, I've seen over the years many. So recently I finished a pricing policy module for some of the GEMBA PM students. I could see that when I was teaching game theory in pricing in the context of health and pharma products, people who are not always working in a strategic context pick up those ideas and were able to translate them into how to decide on pricing or what are the dynamics in pricing and think about the geography of pricing. So the moment you are bringing these insights from the GEMBA program back into your corporate context, you obviously will get an opportunity, I think, to move within the company or even look for newer opportunities beyond the company. And perhaps if that also doesn't happen, you can think about these ideas to translate into your own entrepreneurial aspirations. So these are the three ways I think the GEMBA PM program gives you those action items, those action skills that will translate you into a more alive manager in some sense when you are taking it back to your corporate contexts and daily lives. If that helps for the transition from operations to strategy question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
We have another question from the audience. Ankita, you can unmute and ask. Ankita, are you there?
Yes, am I audible?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon. Question was like, what is the... Hello?
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So my question is basically like, what is the significance of Singapore emotion in this GEMBA program?
I'm going to request Chanchal Singh, who's our program counselor, to please take this question. Chanchal?
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Hi, everyone. A very good evening to all of you. So to talk about the Singapore immersion we have included in this program, it's a 6-day immersion program which will offer a direct exposure to global pharma and biotech innovation ecosystems, the policy makers and regulators, health tech startups and accelerators. It is designed not just for exposure, but for strategic learning, networking, and practical insight. It is particularly around global competitiveness and innovation strategy. Ma'am, you can go ahead with the next question.
I just want to add a line on what Chanchal said,
Yes.
which is that if you look like big picture, where are the big hotspots for tech in health or innovation in the context of health and pharma? In India, in Asia, it is, I think, Singapore, Bangalore, maybe a little bit of the Beijing genomics cluster. Then we have Tel Aviv, then we have Boston, then we have London, and a little bit of the Silicon Valley context. So I'm very happy that you have a immersion program, especially in Singapore, which is a little more culturally attuned in the challenges that you face in doing health properly, innovatively, responsibly in the context of Asia.
We have a question in the chat. Do you think Indian pharma companies are truly ready for global competition in terms of innovation and
Yep.
digital adoption?
Short answer is yes. Big answer is the appetite. I know of some companies I will not name where I can see real energy and appetite to transform themselves as a digital health company. But then there are other also companies who are not willing to show the hunger needed to latch on to this opportunity. And it's a pity it's that way, because you would love to see the top 30, 40 generic companies take advantage of India's technology comparative advantage, blend it with their own discovery and health innovation skills and capabilities historically, and do more for themselves from a very profits perspective, but also for the country and broadly global south. So the short answer is definitely yes, Rohan. The longer answer is we'll have to see who all will catch the bus in this context.
Sure. Thank you, Professor. I think we're very close to the time that we have to close. So I'm going to ask if there are no more questions from the audience, maybe I'll ask the last question. And I know you briefly touched upon this as well, but with AI moving faster than regulations, what role do you think pharma leaders should play in shaping policy for responsible innovation and access?
It's a very good question and a very thoughtful question, Shohini. I think the role is that of generating trust predicated on science, innovation, and privacy. We don't want to fall into the trap of a snake oil, because we don't want to fall into the conversation around, what Indian healthcare and pharma did is problematic. What we do today not just solves India's disease challenges, but also for, as I am continuing to repeat, the global south's disease challenges. We live in a very weird world where England is very hot in this summer. It's monsoons in India. So climate change is staring at us. And new types of diseases are cropping up. If we do something irresponsibly as pharma leaders, that is not going to be sustainable in the long run. So I hope that from a regulatory perspective, the things we teach in the GEMBA PM program translate into more responsible leadership from the pharma ecosystem in India. And again, not just for India, but all of Global South.
Absolutely. So if I'm going to...
Rohan has a last question. I'm working.
Is there another question? Yeah.
I am traveling. What my question is, right now I'm working in Indian pharma market. So how will it help me to get international market exposure? I think quick answer is threefold. The Singapore immersion program. Second is you will see a cohort of folks coming from different geographic contexts. So there will be peer effects. If you have a Russian guy also in the program. And lastly, some of these ideas we will bring to the classroom is very, very international. Whether it's Vish Krishnan talking about health operations, I'm talking about health economics and policy, and others teaching in the GEMBA PM program. That international context, I think as a knowledge generating thing will translate into opportunities for you as you look for jobs within and beyond your organization.
And also, I think that the case studies, the curriculum that
Yes.
brings a lot of these case studies, project-based discussions and opportunities for you to actually have a real, exposure to real world happenings in terms of what's happening around the globe. So I think that's also going to be a very transformative journey for you, for anybody who's joined GEMBA.
Maybe we can take just last question by Pawan.
Yes.
Yeah, Pawan, I think Pawan is a old friend. He's joining in from Lyon in France. Glad to see you, Pawan. He's talking about Say's law. Where do access to technology is still? Do you see AI implements serve an accelerator in overall technology adoption? I'm talking about basic infrastructure to support AI capability, assuming that regulations. Absolutely, Pawan. I do see that. That's why I gave you the Think MD example. Another like taking into considerations the digital infrastructure conversations. Another entrepreneurial intervention to keep in mind is Arman by Aparna Hegre in Mumbai in maternal health. It was a simple text messaging service, but today this has become far more intelligent and it's being scaled around the country. So there are these interventions that show you that despite the frictions in digital infrastructure, and by the way, of course, we know that Southern India is on a different scale than, let's say, Northern India. But we know that as well that 4G and 5G is transforming how smartphones are being accessed by everybody in India today, right? So in that context, I feel AI does have an immense potential to solve the technology issue that you mentioned. But I keep saying this. I hope there are no unintended consequences. I hope this is predicated on trust and science, innovation, and privacy, which is where I think policymakers have a very important role to play, which is where I also think responsible corporate leadership has a very important role to play, if that helps, Pawan.
Absolutely. Thank you, Professor.
You're right, Professor. And actually, the other day I was thinking about, I was having a conversation about a colleague about electronic health records and its adoption in India. And some of these large corporate hospitals are trying to sort of bring that in a big way. But access, privacy, these are really things that, for the common person to be able to understand. And the adoption is largely hinges on a lot of these, I won't say very complex, but at least critical matters, right? I mean,
do I have a minute to comment on the electronic health records? There's a lot of things to be said about electronic health records.
Sure.
This is just an anecdotal example. There's a big hospital in Gurgaon, which has now tried to connect with a friend of mine, a collaborator in IIT Kharagpur, to use the electronic health records to create predictive algorithms and catch diseases early so that they can displace their superstar physicians or clinicians. But here's the fun part. So they are doing it in a very lazy way. They are thinking they will do it cheaply with IIT professor. And what my concern is that they could have done it with an in-house digital team or gone to existing solutions from Microsoft or TCS or Cognizant or whoever. That's not their, the intention is very cheap, very lazy in some sense. And that's my worry while thinking about electronic health. We are every day in every hospital system, public and private in India, multi-speciality or unispeciality, generating a ton of data. But it's the time for these hospital systems to choose the pathway, not a cheap, lazy way, but a responsible science, innovation, privacy-driven way that can really magnify the power that we have with our national electronic health record systems.
Absolutely. So if there are no more questions, I think that this could go on. This is such an interesting topic.
I know, this could go on.
And Professor, your answers are really such, brilliant and, they evoke more questions. So, but I think in the interest of time, we're going to stop here.
Sure.
Thank you again, Professor Chatterjee, for giving us a lot of food for thought. I would request the audience, if you have more questions about our session today or about the university or about the GEMBA program itself, please do connect with our admissions team and our counseling team and schedule one-on-one call. With that, we're going to conclude today's session. On behalf of Ahmedabad University and everyone present, I extend our heartfelt thanks to Professor Chatterjee for generously sharing his time and valuable perspectives with us. We deeply appreciate your presence and contribution, Professor. Thank you also to the audience for making this a very interactive and engaging session. And before signing off, I wish everyone a very wonderful day ahead. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. I see the Sabarmati in the background. I wish you all the best.
Sure. And hope to see you soon, Professor. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, Mehak, can we sign off?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Bye.